The United States of America are failing in MMA. Despite making up 35% of the current active roster, they have zero champions in the male divisions. Out of the 8 male divisions, none of them are from the US. Now, the last one was John Jones before he vacated and retired. Personally, I wouldn't want to fight Tom Aspinall either, but that's not the point. There is a lack of American talent in the UFC, not only as the champions at the top of the division, but also within the rankings. If we look through the rankings, from flyweight all the way through to heavyweight. So if we look at flyweight, Brandon Royval just lost to Van, 0-2 against Pantoja. Bantamweight, there's Corey Sanhagen. I'll come back to him in a second, but apart from him, no one else. Featherweight, no one really in there. Lightweight, there's Gaethje, but he still needs a win, and he's 36 years old. Speaking of retirement, if he doesn't get that shot. Welterweight, there's Sean Brady. We'll come back to him as well. Middleweight, there's no one. Light heavyweight, no one. Heavyweight, no one. There's only two main contenders that are from the US that have a chance of becoming champion within the next year. Corey Sanhagen, who has to get past Marab. Marab, the go to the division. He has to get past him to become champion. And Sean Brady. Brady is in the most stacked division in the UFC. We have Kamaru Usman coming back. Usman looks as good as ever. We have Shavkat. We have Bilal Muhammad. We have JDM. We have Makhachev moving up to welterweight as well. We have Topuria saying that if Makhachev wins the belt, he's coming for him. We have Morales, Gary, Joaquin Buckley. I know we just got fraud checked, but he's still in the mix. He's still dangerous. We have Prates outside the top 10. Stacked division. We have your two best bets to become champion are either have to get past the go to their division or are in the most stacked division in the company. So it's not looking good for the US at the moment. But why is this? In my opinion, I think it's because US wrestling is not up to par. It sucks at the moment. I'm not going to say it isn't what it used to be. I think it stayed the same, which isn't good. It needs to be progressing. I don't think it's adapted to modern day MMA. And not necessarily the way that US wrestling isn't as good, but more that they aren't adapting it to MMA very well. The basic fundamentals aren't working the same way. Because what used to happen is this is the pipeline. This is the best way I have of explaining it. You have a fighter who comes in with a wrestling base. They train MMA for about 6 months to a year. They make the pro debut. They fight a few times. They join the UFC. They learn the rest on the way. That doesn't work anymore. We saw this with Bo Nickel. He followed the exact same pipeline and he got smoked because the basic fundamentals of wrestling no longer works in modern day MMA climate. Everyone else has gotten better. The bottom feeders of the MMA world or of the UFC are much, much better. They know how to defend against this stuff now. They know how to defend against basic wrestlers or people with a wrestling base. You can't just come in with 5 pro fights and a wrestling base and expect to do good in the UFC against UFC caliber opponents. That doesn't work anymore. Even if you look here, and this is common across all of these US wrestlers who are coming in, they're getting fraud checked against bottom feeder guys because they don't have the skills needed, because their whole thing or their whole success is driven behind getting into the UFC as soon as possible and then learning against these top tier guys. They're not reaching the top tier guys because they can't get past the bottom feeders because they're too much for them. If we compare this to the Dagestanis, they come in with a different base. They come in with the wrestling base, sure, but they also do Sambo. Now, combat Sambo is basically just MMA on a mat, on an open mat, and you're trying to submit the other person rather than, knock them clean out. Basically, it's something like that. That's my understanding of it. If you look at all of these Dagestani guys who are doing very good inside the UFC, Ankalaev, Mozart Evloev, Habib Nurmagomedov, Umar Nurmagomedov, he's not even on the screen, bro. And I can name more of them. Islam Makhachev. They all come in with that Sambo base. All of these guys have done Sambo. All of them have wrestling experiences. They come in with a wrestling and Sambo base. They train for a similar amount of time before making their pro debut, about 6 months to a year. They fight multiple times. I go back to the one from before with the wrestling ones. These guys fight a few times and try and get into the UFC immediately. These wrestling guys, or these guys from Dagestan, they fight multiple times. Obviously, they're against cans and against guys who aren't that good, but The point's still there. They fight more times outside the UFC before getting into the UFC, and then they walk through their opponents because they're more used to MMA. They've adapted their style and their base to MMA. These American wrestling guys are too rigid in their style. They haven't adapted it to MMA, and that's the truth. Because these Dagestani wrestling guys, they use their bases of sambo and wrestling and then adapt it to MMA. The US wrestling don't do that, and that's a problem. On top of that, money is an issue, because if we look at Dana White and how he's the modern day version of Mr. Krabs, if we look at the UFC pay structure, fight 1 you get 10 for 10 plus a 4K Venom bonus. Fight 2 is 12 for 12. Fight 3 is 15 for 15. If you win your first fight, no bonuses, no knockout bonuses, no fight of the night, you get $24,000 minus manager fees, training fees, and any healthcare which isn't immediately covered from the UFC. So if you get injured in the fight, if you break your arm in the fight, the UFC cover it. But if you break your arm in a training camp, they don't. It's on you basically. You walk out of that with 15K. Let's say you go 2-1 in the UFC, you win 2, lose 1. Your total for that year is $44,000. You pay your taxes, which I think in this scenario would take you down to $36,000. Listen, I ChatGPT'd it. It's ChatGPT's fault, not mine. Anyway, the UFC basic standard living wage is about 35 to 38K. That's to survive. You're barely making that. In Brazil, upper class is 25K. In Dagestan, it's 6K. You know what I'm saying? So what is barely livable in the US is upper class in Russia and Brazil. What this means is, if you're in the US, you need a side job. If you're a prospect trying to do MMA in the USA, you need a side job. Whereas in Brazil and Russia, you can be a full-time fighter. You can put 100% of your effort into becoming a fighter, take your 36K in a year, live like a king, and be a full-time fighter. You can't do that in the US. So that's just the differences between them. And that's the two main points I've identified on why Americans are struggling in the UFC. And there's probably more reasons and more micro reasons on why they're being, bullied out of the UFC, and why they have not only no champions but no contenders in each division, which is insane to me. But let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.